And welcome to this edition of Vito Built Something. I'm going to teach you how to build these cornhole boards that you see over my shoulder. I've got a few that are waiting to be painted and some that are waiting for stickers and delivery. In the meantime, I'm building a few more sets that have been requested, and I figured this time I would make a little video teaching you how to make one so you don't need me. You can save some money, you can do it yourself. It's a fun project. I started out making them for myself, but once I bought all the stuff to make them, I figured I would just make them for other people too. So what you're going to need on your first trip to Home Depot is a drill bit that bores 6-inch holes. This is 6-inch in diameter. That was probably the most expensive thing I bought, and that's why I started making sets and selling them to kind of like justify the cost. After that, to make a set of 2 boards, which is one game, you're going to need 4 2x4s, or they're known as studs. They're going to be 8 feet long or 96 inches, and you're going to need 2 boards of MDF. It's a manufactured material. It kind of looks like really thick cardboard. It's going to be one aisle over from the studs, but you're going to need a 12, I'm sorry, I keep saying 12. You're going to need 24 inches by 48 inches, or 2 feet by 4 feet. You're going to need 2 of those, and that's going to act as the top of the board where you throw the bags. And aside from that, you might need a little wood glue. I use wood glue just to make sure it sticks together well. You're going to need deck screws, 3 inches long. A box of them should do. You might want to get 2 boxes and take them back if you have extra. You're going to need a radial saw and tape measure, pencil, a square, and if I can think of anything along the way, I'll just show you as we make it. Ready? Alright, I've got 4 studs here on my sawhorses. I'm going to measure the 2 sides and the front and the back. Now, because it's 2 feet by 4 feet, I like to cut the front and the back 2 feet, and then the sides, instead of making them 4 feet, you got to compensate for the width of these, which added together ends up about 3 inches. So 4 feet minus 3 inches equals 45 inches, because 4 feet is 48 inches. Little mental math for you. So you need 2 pieces at 45 inches for each board, and 2 pieces at 2 feet for each board, which is 4 and 4. So I'm going to measure those and cut those. So when I measure, I like to start from the end, of course, which is normal, but then I go to the middle, and then for the second side, I start from the other end and go to the middle. The reason being is that if you measure from this line on, you might mess up your saw cut a little bit. It might not be perfect. Plus the width of the blade is never usually accounted for. So it's better to start from both ends. That way you get 2 straight edges and you know your lengths are the way you measured them. So I did that for 2 studs. I did them at 45 and then at 45. That'll give me the 2 sides for each board. And then on 1 stud, I did 2-foot increments to give you the front and back for each board. Now when you do 2, 4, 6, don't just assume that the last 2 feet are perfect. Measure them just in case. Sometimes they're a little short, sometimes they're a little long, and you'll be better off. You know the old saying, measure twice, cut once. You learn that the hard way. The last stud we're going to save for when we make the legs. I'll show you how to do that and a couple little tricks on how to make them level on the ground even though they're going to be slanted. Once you have them cut, this is how you should set them up. The 2-foot piece should go on the front and in the back. And then the 45-inch pieces go on the inside. Now the reason I did that is because when you're playing, what you see is the front. So it's nice to see a nice flat surface there. And when you're waiting for the people to throw, you're standing in the back. So instead of having the stud stick out like that, which would be kind of ugly, I accounted for it to be like that. So it hides the edges where they'll be seen the most. So once you got it like this, you put in 2 deck screws, about 3 inches or 3.5 here. Pretty obvious. Same over here. And be cautious. I like to use the feel method to make sure these are square and even. So you kind of just feel here and you feel here and make sure they're level. And then after you get them screwed in, we'll start with the MDF. Now this process should be a lot simpler, but unfortunately the 12 by 24 MDF comes a little long. So what I like to do is make sure the top part is as close to a square by feeling the corners, and even here, and I use both hands at the same time, but I'm holding my camera / phone so I can't. But once this is nice and even, and this hangs over about the same amount as that because it's usually not perfectly flush since the 2x4s aren't always straight, I kind of just feel down the sides both at the same time again and make sure they're as even as possible. Then I'll take my pencil and draw a line underneath the MDF and I'll trim that. I don't know if you can see with this direct sunlight, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to draw a pencil line and then I'm going to show you my setup for cutting a perfectly straight line with the radial saw. Okay, so here's the setup. You can get one of these guides here at Home Depot in the hardware section. I had to ask and find them. You can see my mark. Sorry about the shadow. My pencil mark from when I trace it underneath the 2x4s. Then I measured 1.5 inches because I measured the distance between here and my blade, and it was 1.5 inches. So I put a mark here, I put a mark here, I line up the guide, C-clamp, that's these little guys where you twist them when you get tight. So now I got a nice straight line right here to guide my saw, and then I clamped it with some cheap Harbor Freight clamps that I got for like $5 so that the sawhorse doesn't turn as I push it against the MDF. So I'm going to cut that off real quick. If I had another person here, I would let you watch, but you know, it's a perfect little cut. It's pretty. My side of the line is straight. You can see that it wasn't square. Well, maybe you can't see on the phone, but I can see that this side is a little thinner than that side, which means it'll be perfect for this. So I don't recommend like making a template and do it over and over again. I recommend putting the MDF on each individual board that you frame and then tracing it with the pencil line, because the 2x4s aren't perfect and neither are all of your cuts or all of your screwing. Insert joke. So measure your MDF individually. That way they'll all be perfectly fit for the boards you're already putting them on. Once you've got everything nice and square and you've tested out the MDF and make sure it sits nice, you're getting ready to glue and screw. So I use Type Bond 2 Premium Wood Glue. It rhymes, and so can you. And I apply it like so. I'm a little bit low. Oh no. Where does the glue go? Sorry guys, but you should have known this video was going to be cheesy at some point. This isn't even necessary to show you, but I like my fun squiggly lines. Reminds me when I was bartending and I would lace the martini glasses with chocolate syrup. I would do some fun little sketch or design in there. If I ever made you a martini, you know what I'm talking about. Oh yeah, good sound effects. Hopefully I edit that part out because it's really unnecessary. Okay, so I'm going to put the MDF on and then I'm going to screw it with some drywall screws. I would recommend galvanized so they don't rust, but my drywall screws are going to be bored pretty deep, and then I'm going to cover them and paint them so there's no real chance of them rusting. But there's that. I'll show you what that looks like. Once it's glued and screwed, which you can see, and the edges are nice and even, as close as you can get them, it's time to find the center for the hole that you're going to be drilling. So I have this plastic square that's going to take me 9 inches from the top, which is right here, and then this should be 24 across, but it looks like it's more 24 and a 16th, or no, 24 and 2/16. So I'll go 12 and 1/16 over just to make it perfectly center. Being a 16th off is not a big deal, but you have to make for the diameter of the lead of the pencil. So here's my 9. And that's how you find the center for where you're going to drill. I like to make a little T so I know exactly where the center is. And I'll drill the hole. So that's 12 inches in, or, you know, directly in the middle. If it's 24 and an 1/8, 24 and 2/8, or whatever, you just find the center. And you go 9 inches from the top. Make a dot and drill your hole. I used my electric power drill to drill the hole because it wears out battery when you do a lot of them. So once you get the hole, you might notice that because it's kind of like a paper composite, that you're going to have some rough edges. So I take some fine grit sandpaper. I think this is like 120, I guess. 220, even finer. And keep your phone away when you're drilling that hole, because mine just got super dusty. But anyway, you just kind of rub away the roughness, get it nice and smooth. And then you're ready for legs and for paint. Alright, by now you should be at this point. Both of them glued, screwed, framed, and drilled. You should have sanded your holes. And you could sand where the screws went into because they tend to kick up a little bit of, like, you know, the paper material of the MDF. Once you get to this point, you're going to go back to that 2x4 you set aside for the legs. And you're going to cut them at 12 inches per leg. So that's 2 legs per board, 4 legs total. Once you have 4 pieces at 12 inches, I'll show you what to do with them. This thing on? Okay, the next part I'm going to show you is the legs. So the legs are going to go here, flush with the MDF, and square to here and here. Now the thing is when you do that, it kind of sits with it on an angle. You'll notice that. So we'll do this here. We'll put the camera here. Now when I have it up, it's balancing. Okay, the other thing you know is it's got to be 1 foot off the ground. And right now it's 13 inches off the ground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure 12 inches. Helps if you lock the tape measure. 12 inches. That's what she said. Okay. We still there? Yeah, we're still here. Okay, so I made a little line to 12 inches, so I have that much to work with. Now, to get a level line with the floor, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my square, lay it flat on the floor, and as long as this is all tucked away nicely and neatly, when I draw this line here, it's going to give me the right angle. Now you're saying, wait a minute, you have 2 lines. The line you marked that was 12 inches, and then the one that's the right angle. Well, you take your square, and you make them work. You make sure they're evenly spaced apart, and you draw your real line to where you got to cut. And that's where you cut. See that? That way when I put it in, it'll lean like that. And that was a complicated explanation of something pretty simple. Then you hop on this saw. You line up your cuts, which that's nowhere near. And once you cut one, then you lay it back on here. You trace it, and you can use it as kind of a template and draw a few that way. And once those are cut, you just attach them with some screws, which I'll show you how. I haven't screwed it yet. I measured from the floor to the top edge, make sure it's 12 inches before I screw it in. Measure twice, screw once, or something. But everything seems good, so I'm going to go ahead and screw these puppies in. I use 8x3 deck screws. And then I put this 2x4 of the leg, the square side, not the angled side, in the corner, nice and tight, but don't push too high because the MDF will actually give. And then I put a screw here and a screw here so it doesn't shift and shake. And I do that on both sides. Just finished screwing that one. This one looks the same. I'll flip it over. And voila! Makes it nice and flat. Might not be like perfect, but it'll do. My garage floor isn't perfectly flat, and that's why that's floating. But when you're on the grass, on the dirt, on uneven ground, it all seems to work out. But either way, now you know how to build one of these boards. So, in summary, 24 inches, 45 inches, the hole is 9 inches, and then centered from here to here, which is usually about 12, sometimes a 16th more or less. From the ground up, the legs have to be, well, not the legs, but from the ground up, the board has to be 12 inches high. The legs, when you cut them on an angle, just measure from the top down to 12 inches, and then you keep the same angle. I use primer, this stuff right here. So far I like it. I roll it on, and that seems to work. And then I use some spray paint, depending on what colors people want. This stuff's been working well, although the sheen, if it's not applied evenly, kind of looks funky, but the primer's been helping that. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed, hope you learned something, hope you have fun, hope you don't get hurt. And if you don't feel like doing it, just pay me to do it. Thanks.